Doba, who is the new host of Morning in America Weekend Edition. So perhaps I just want to start out because, of course, NewsNation is this new network, I guess relatively new. It's owned by Nexstar. It owns, a bunch of different local stations across the country. But what's interesting here, I've talked to some of the other people, some of your colleagues who really are putting an emphasis on the work that NewsNation's doing in the way of, making it as nonpartisan and as non-biased as possible. Perhaps speak a little bit about the work that you're doing, especially yourself coming from two other networks that perhaps are a little bit different than NewsNation.
First, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan of you, Wyatt. We pride ourselves here at NewsNation for being right in the middle. And, I was at CBS where I covered Donald Trump and I followed him on the trail. I was at Cheddar where I covered financial news. And being here, I'm thrusted back into politics. And I knew I wanted to be at a network that wasn't divisive or wasn't a simple echo chamber. On our shows, and that's really Monday through Friday, and of course my weekend show, we always get both sides and we always ask the tough questions. So we make sure our bias doesn't come across in any of the reporting we do. And I was looking at NewsNation from afar for a long time. As you mentioned, they launched like 2-3 years ago, and I thought this is a great network. I love what they're thinking, and I love the talent that they were attracting. There were huge names like Ashley Banfield and Elizabeth Vargas, and these people, journalists that I grew up watching and respected so much. So I watched NewsNation, and then when I got the opportunity to not only interview here, but ultimately start a brand new show on the weekends as we expand on this network, I jumped at the chance. I was so grateful.
And that's interesting too, because of course it's making the switch to, kind of rolling programming on a day-to-day basis, whereas when it first launched, it was kind of just, I think it was a 1-hour program or something.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously it's a lot similar now to something like CNN or NBC, and people are turning to it for kind of more consecutive and rolling news coverage. What role do you foresee it playing, or what role do you foresee shows like yours playing, as of course we're in a very pivotal news cycle right now?
The one thing about NewsNation is that it really covers politics very heavily, which I love, but it tells the story where a viewer at home will understand it. It makes it digestible. We can throw all these phrases out there that people at home may not really understand, but the point is, for George Santos, I'm going to use that as an example, or Tom Suozzi, who won, who replaced him in the special election yesterday. We want viewers to know what Suozzi is going to do for the district. And this was a local race, but it has national implications. So we want to make sure our viewers nationwide knows why this has nationwide implications, what this is going to mean in the Senate, what this is going to mean in the House, especially now that the GOP has such a narrow majority. We want to make sure that viewers at home understand this and how it's going to affect them. For example, there's a vote next month about the government shutting down again. That vote is going to be a lot tighter because of this race. That's going to affect all Americans. And we want to make sure people know just the vastness of these stories that we cover.
And one of the things that I know you and I were kind of talking about before we started recording was the idea that in many ways the news industry is kind of making perhaps a little bit of a change as, years progress, as, people are, I guess, in some ways relying less and less on television news, perhaps turning to ways like digital. Even NewsNation, for example, is expanding to things like TikTok. They have TikTok pages, Instagram pages, and really kind of putting an emphasis on social media. But what role do you foresee television news playing versus some of these digital media platforms playing? Of course, as I mentioned before, we're in a very pivotal news cycle, and so how people consume their news is going to be very important.
Right, you know this as well as I do. Journalism is always evolving, and our job as journalists and networks is keeping up with the time, not people keeping up with us, right? We want to be in the forefront here. I think adapting social media is crucial to all journalists. When I got in the business 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. But now we have to use those platforms because, to your point, look, when I was young, I rushed home for the 6 p.m. news, right? I couldn't wait. People aren't doing that anymore. They want that instant gratification. They want it on their phone. So NewsNation and so many more networks are doing such a great job of not only getting those exclusive interviews and getting those stories that are going to impact people on our cable network, but we're very good about getting it out in digital too, because we know people are watching. So as far as the role it's going to play, I think we just have to keep up with the digital cycle. The issue here is what I see with a lot of digital media, not necessarily networks, of course, but a lot of people are just rushing to get the story out there first, trying to have that exclusive. With so many media outlets out there now, there's a lot of misinformation. And I think the networks and the more experienced journalists know that, and you have to take a step back. Be like, I don't need to be the first one to break this story on TikTok or on X. I need to make sure my facts are right. So it's keeping up with the technology of journalism that is evolving all the time, but also staying true to being an actual journalist and the ethics and integrity that comes with it.